The camera pans to a woman running, a desperate silhouette against the dark street. She is Lena Moore, 28 years old. She flees a residence barefoot, her shirt torn, a stain of blood visible on her arm. She crosses the pavement and disappears into the shadows of a nearby porch. A red pickup truck is seen entering the neighborhood. The man behind the wheel is 35-year-old Ethan Rohr. He slows his vehicle near the home she just escaped, his search methodic before proceeding down the road. Investigators would later conclude he was circling the block, hunting for her after she broke free. A homeowner, alerted by movement on his porch, makes a call for help. The events that followed would unravel the brutal story of a night she had fought desperately to survive. This footage was captured on June 9, 2024, in the town of Coldwater, Alabama. Law enforcement would later characterize the neighborhood as peaceful, a place where the phone rarely rings after midnight. 28-year-old Lena Moore was a morning waitress at a diner in the small Alabama community. Colleagues knew her for putting in long hours, for her quiet demeanor, and for a habit of leaving her shift early to prevent trouble at home. She shared a home with her boyfriend, Ethan Rohr, a 35-year-old construction foreman. Their relationship had begun 2 years prior. In the weeks preceding the attack, coworkers would recall for detectives that Lena had appeared at work bearing visible bruises. Her explanation was always a simple accident, a fall on the steps. A friend later disclosed that Lena was making plans to leave Ethan, but she was paralyzed by the fear that he would come after her. Ethan's history included prior arrests for disorderly conduct and assault, stemming from bar altercations years earlier. Both cases were ultimately dismissed. He was the legal owner of 2 firearms, one reportedly kept in his truck, the other beneath their bed. In the period leading up to the incident, neighbors reported hearing shouting from the residence late at night. One call to a non-emergency line described the sound of objects crashing against the walls. No officers were dispatched that evening. No official report was ever filed. The dispute that would sever their relationship started over a broken cell phone. As the clock ticked past midnight, it had spiraled into violence. At 4:21 a.m., the 911 call came in from a man living 2 doors down. He reported a woman concealed on his porch, telling the dispatcher she was injured and seemed too afraid to speak. When deputies arrived on the scene, they found Lena crouched by the door, trembling. Her left shoulder was visibly dislocated. Blood saturated her sleeve and stained her collarbone. She explained that she had escaped while Ethan was away and that he was armed. She recounted to the deputies how he had been drinking since the previous evening, accusing her of infidelity. For her own protection, deputies guided her into a patrol car as they waited for paramedics. She had only one repeated plea: "Don't let him find me." While one deputy stayed with her, another drove to the house she had fled. The front door was found ajar. In the driveway sat a red pickup, its engine silent, but its headlights still glowing in the pre-dawn darkness. The deputies announced their presence, listening for any sign of movement from within. Hearing nothing, they advanced into the front yard, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. After several minutes, a figure emerged in the doorway. He was identified as Ethan Rohr. Shirtless, he held a cell phone in his hand. He informed the officers he had just been woken up and was searching for his girlfriend. He denied any altercation had occurred. He presented a story that she had been drinking and had angrily left on her own. The deputies observed he was limping on his right leg and had dried blood on his hand. When questioned about the injuries, he claimed he had cut himself while repairing a cabinet. The officer's eyes were drawn to a broken table leg lying near the entrance. He refused to consent to a search of the home without a warrant. Supervisors were alerted to the situation. Ethan was detained outside as deputies secured the perimeter of the property. A search warrant was requested and granted within the hour. Detectives arrived as the first light of dawn broke the horizon. Body-worn cameras documented the scene that awaited them inside. In the kitchen, a trail of splintered wood fragments and droplets of blood pointed toward the hallway. A cell phone with a fractured screen was collected from near the counter. The hallway carpet bore the unmistakable signs of drag marks that continued into the bedroom. Within the bedroom, investigators uncovered a pillow and blanket, both heavily stained with blood. An impact mark in the drywall corresponded with the location of Lena's head injury. On the floor beside the bed lay a small, tomahawk-like tool, its handle bearing a visible residue. Subsequent laboratory analysis would confirm the blood belonged to Lena. In the bathroom connected to the bedroom, officers found a pistol magazine resting on the counter, alongside streaks of blood on the toilet and the adjacent wall. A towel had been jammed into the sink, suggesting a hurried attempt to clean the scene. Photographs documented partial handprints that were consistent with Ethan's right hand. Forensic teams methodically collected samples from every surface that showed signs of staining. DNA testing confirmed that every single trace of blood matched the victim. Investigators made a crucial observation. Blood had been wiped from several surfaces, indicating a cleanup was underway before law enforcement arrived. Later that morning, detectives interviewed Lena at Claiborne General Hospital. Her documented injuries included a fractured collarbone, extensive bruising across her body, and a deep laceration on her scalp that required staples to close. Her version of events was unwavering and aligned perfectly with the physical evidence recovered from the residence. She stated the argument had erupted around 8 p.m. when Ethan discovered messages on her phone. The violence escalated with terrifying speed. A phone was hurled, she was slammed against a wall, and the blows began to land. When she attempted to flee, he reached for an axe he kept near his toolbox and brought the blunt side down hard on her shoulder. From there, he dragged her into the bathroom, where he forced her head into the toilet bowl. He told her this was a lesson in how to listen. In a desperate act of self-preservation, she feigned unconsciousness. The ruse worked. When he left to find his truck keys, she saw her only chance, bolting through the back door and into the darkness, running across 2 yards toward the faint glow of a porch light. Her injuries corroborated every detail of her harrowing account. She confessed to detectives a hidden history of abuse, explaining she'd never reported it out of a paralyzing fear that he always found a way to know. At precisely 9 a.m., Ethan Rohr was escorted to the sheriff's office for processing. During interrogation, he admitted to a verbal dispute but steadfastly denied any physical altercation. He attempted to paint Lena as the aggressor, a woman who unravels when she drinks. He offered a ready explanation for the blood discovered in the bathroom, claiming it was his own, from a hand he'd cut on scrap metal. That narrative was immediately challenged by a series of crime scene photographs laid out before him. The axe, he insisted, was simply for his work. The deep indentation in the wall, he claimed, was from a moving mishap that occurred months prior. But when investigators informed him that the victim's wounds were forensically consistent with being struck by that exact tool, his composure broke. He asked for an attorney. The interview was terminated. The state filed its charges: aggravated assault, kidnapping with bodily injury, battery, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. A final disturbing charge was added: cruelty to children. Deputies learned his 11-year-old son had been asleep in the very next room during the entire assault. The crime lab analysis provided irrefutable links. DNA from the blood on both the axe handle and a pistol was a perfect match to Lena's. The blood spatter patterns in the bathroom told a story of impact and dragging, perfectly aligning with her statement. Forensic technicians recovered Ethan's fingerprints from a towel that had been used in an attempt to sanitize the scene. At the hospital, toxicology reports showed no trace of alcohol in Lena's system. The complete case file was immense, containing over 200 photographs, 14 recorded interviews, and more than 40 minutes of body camera video. The evidence overwhelmingly supported the investigators' theory. Ethan had tried to conceal the crime before leaving to hunt for Lena. Statements were collected from 3 different neighbors. 2 of them recalled hearing shouting and a loud, heavy thud sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight. One neighbor specifically remembered the sound of a truck starting up, leaving, and then returning approximately 30 minutes later. Another neighbor's security camera captured footage of a truck, identical to Ethan's, circling the block 3 separate times between 3:30 and 4 a.m. The 911 caller, a man named John Keller, stated that Lena was visibly injured and seemed terrified to speak. His eyewitness account was a perfect match to the video evidence. He recounted to detectives that she never uttered a single word. She just looked at him with an expression that said she still didn't know if she was safe. From that point, the case proceeded with remarkable speed. Prosecutors built their case on over 20 exhibits, which included graphic photographs, detailed hospital reports, and a series of recorded phone calls Ethan made from jail. In one of those calls, he could be heard telling a friend, "They have no proof I did a thing. She just took off drunk." In another call, he chillingly remarked that if she had just stayed home, none of it would have happened. During the trial, Lena gave her testimony from behind the safety of a privacy screen. She was on the stand for 2 hours. She recounted the brutal attack with a detached, clinical calm. When the prosecutor asked why she had remained in the relationship, her answer was haunting. "I kept thinking he would change." Ethan's defense team proposed an alternate theory that her injuries were from an accidental fall and that she had invented the more sinister parts of her story. This claim was systematically dismantled by forensic experts. The jury was shown detailed photographs of the bedroom and bathroom, silent witnesses to the violence that occurred there. After 4 days, the prosecution rested its case. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. Ethan Rohr was found guilty on all major counts, with the single exception of terroristic threats. The judge handed down a sentence of life in prison, plus an additional 20 years, with no possibility of parole. After the sentencing, Lena was relocated out of state, entering a victim protection program to begin a new life. She declined all requests for further interviews, but did submit a written statement to the court. "I ran because I wanted to live. That is all I was trying to do." The sheriff's department would later release portions of the case footage for use in law enforcement training. This footage documented the initial 911 response, the moment she was discovered on the porch, and the meticulous evidence collection that built the case against him. His red pickup truck was impounded and currently remains in a police storage facility. The axe, the handgun, and the blood-soaked towel were all cataloged as permanent evidence. Senior investigators would later refer to the case as one of the most unambiguous examples of how escalating domestic violence can become attempted homicide. The pattern was textbook. It started with threats, evolved into control, and culminated in a near-fatal encounter. The security footage of Lena's escape is less than 2 minutes long, yet in that brief, grainy window, it captures the precise moment a victim broke free from her captor. After months of terror, the case exposed a familiar pattern, one that is repeated in quiet neighborhoods all across the country. It is a story of warnings that went unheeded until it was nearly too late. Lena survived for 2 reasons: because she ran, and because a neighbor chose to open his door. The account you have just heard is inspired by the details of a real-life investigation. You've been watching Undocumented. While names, locations, and certain specific details have been altered for this presentation, the core message of the events is real. Stay aware, stay safe. Subscribe and enable notifications for more explorations into crimes like this. The harrowing story of Lena Moore serves as a chilling reminder that the most peaceful neighborhoods often harbor the loudest silences. Domestic violence is not a private dispute. It is a slow-burning fire that devours the soul before it destroys the body. It begins with a subtle theft of autonomy, a monitored conversation, a shattered phone, and escalates into a desperate, midnight fight for the very next breath. To those currently living in the shadows of fear, your survival is an act of revolution. Lena's escape was more than a sprint toward safety. It was a reclamation of her human right to exist. The hope that an abuser will change is often the heaviest chain a victim carries. Break it. Your life is worth the terrifying leap into the unknown, because staying for love should never mean staying to die. As a community, we must hold the light. Lena survived because a neighbor chose to open his door when the world felt cold. We must stop turning up the volume to drown out the shouting next door. We must be the sanctuary. Look closer, listen better, and never underestimate the power of a porch light left on for a soul in flight. Awareness is the first step, but courageous action is the bridge to life. Don't let the next story end in silence.